Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is how the program design and application of the mindfulness and self-compassion works. Okay, here we go. Oops. Okay. So in the old days, we used to believe in global study and study abroad, that if people or students went abroad, they would by osmosis sort of, absorb the host culture, and they would easily adapt, and they would just be able to function as, high functioning intercultural people. It turns out that was 100% false. It turns out that unless there's a structured environment that imparts intercultural education and mentoring in an ongoing fashion, over 90% of students will actually become more ethnocentric while they are studying abroad. So this is pretty serious. So since our mission at Tufts-Skidmore, Spain, is to develop global people and these qualities of global people, we employ mindfulness in order to achieve this. So what do global people act like? Well, global people show a deep interest in the host culture in which they're participating, a deep interest for the culture, for its people, a respectful and intentional approach to cultural difference, a desire to mirror cultural practices in order to signal to the culture respect, and a desire to fit into a cultural logic, an increasing sense of connection, a sense of well-being, importantly, without minimizing or idealizing real differences, but actually being able to be critical within the culture and see it as it operates and as you relate to it. And ultimately, the ability to shift between different cultural frameworks and to understand them from within their own logic. An example I always like to give my students of this is when students come to Madrid, they learn that if a friend introduces you to a friend, and this is pre-COVID, you're going to give 2 kisses, right, on both cheeks. Well, this is something that is not part of the American culture. But our students at the beginning are a little reticent, then they learn how to do this, and then they love it. But they're never going to come back to the United States and suddenly start kissing everybody on both cheeks. So this means that they've become global people, and they understand that when they're standing on Spanish soil, they know how to act. They know what's expected, and they are willing and ready to do that. And when they're back in American culture, they don't do that because, again, they understand the culture from within. So that kind of intercultural flexibility is something that we want to develop. What we don't want to develop, and what we feel very sad about, is when we see students resisting this work, because it's very hard work, and reducing their experience to what an intercultural theorist has called an American experience in the vicinity of Madrid. And this happens for many reasons, but it mainly happens because of the human mind. When the human mind, when it encounters difficulty, pain, unpleasantness, discomfort, recoils from all those things, right? Our minds hate pain. And so we'll do anything to get away from it. We have powerful emotions in response to feeling, for example, if I'm thinking about my students, ego shrinkage, don't know how things work, defenseless, clueless, uncomfortable. All of these things are really hard to bear, right? So if students don't have a way to actually make explicit for themselves that this is part of the work, right? And what I need to do is bring myself to this work, be aware of what's happening to me, be aware of what's happening inside of me, and learn how to take care of my feelings so that I can continue to move forward, because it's challenging. And I always say to my students that they're incredibly courageous for doing this work, because not everybody decides to study abroad, and people who do are basically signing up for a bumpy road. And so if we can help teach our students to climb down out of their heads, into their bodies and be in the present moment, which, by the way, is the only place that we're actually living, right? Even though in our heads, we're always in the past and the future, what we're going to eat for lunch, the argument we're going to have with our friend if she ever dares to say that thing that we know she's thinking, but she never says. We're everywhere but in the present moment. So if we can try to help students get into their bodies, feel their sensations, feel their feelings, and above all, just be present in the present moment, then we have a chance at teaching them how to be mindful instead of full of their minds. So here's what the untrained mind does. And the first day students show up to orientation, I usually say to them in one of the meetings, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, my Spanish sucks. I have the worst Spanish of anyone in this group. You know, I feel like everyone's judging me. I should never have come here. What was I thinking? And my students look at me and I see their faces, and later they'll say, you're a genius. It's like you read my mind. And I'm like, no, it's just, I know, it's like Groundhog's Day. I know what you guys are thinking because this is how your minds work, right? My Spanish sucks. I suck, okay? This hurts. So who's to blame? Me. Or something that happens to students in the first couple of weeks. Come into the program center and talk to one of my staff or to me or to a faculty member. Why are people walking so slow here? You know, like what's with the crawling down the street? You know, and so it's like, I'm in Madrid, my fast-paced walking, you know, has no place here. I hate you people. I hate you slow walkers, you know, I can't stand this. This is wrong. You should be walking faster. Okay, or people are really unfriendly here. And this is because students lack enough knowledge to understand that strangers don't smile at you here or say hello. If I don't know you and I see you on the street or in a grocery store, I am not going to smile at you or say hello to you, because if I do that, it actually means I know you, right? And so there's a different cultural logic here. It doesn't mean anybody's hating you, but a person who looks at you and doesn't smile and doesn't say hello, when you come from a context in the States where maybe at the grocery store, people you don't know are like, hey, hi, smiling. So the response can be, people are unfriendly to me here. What's wrong with me, right? Or what's wrong with them, right? But you see in all these scenarios, the untrained mind, when in discomfort, when uncertain, goes straight to somebody's to blame. So what can we do to help this? Well, mindfulness, if we practice mindfulness, mindfulness is a playful awareness. I like to think of it sometimes as like an alien. You know, if an alien came down here from a different planet, just being fascinated by human behavior and by, you know, a grape, you know, just wanting to discover, what is this? What's happening? Sort of like little children. If you see a child for the first time discovering a sprinkler, and just being like, oh my God, what, am I getting wet? What's happening? Let me get closer to this. No, let me run. But just feeling really interested in what's going on, right? I just want to know what's happening. So if we stick with that and we just want to know what's happening, right? And we sort of accept what's happening, because that's our goal, is to really just kind of be intercultural detectives, then we can kind of create some space between that story that our mind's telling us, right? The internal narrative. And we can ask ourselves other kinds of questions. What's really happening right now? What's happening in my body? You know, is my chest tight? What's happening in my mind? What's the story I'm telling myself about the slow living in Madrid and how wrong it is, right? And if I'm really suffering, we can use self-compassion, which is the other wing of mindfulness, to ask the question, how can I be kind to myself right now? Because this hurts. Right? So if we can climb down out of our heads and out of the story, those scenarios could look something like this. So the student who's sitting there the first day and realizes, I haven't understood probably 60% of what's been said to me today. You know, oh my God, my Spanish sucks. Oh, what have I done? So that person could think to themselves in a mindful way, I'm worried that my Spanish isn't good enough. You know, I am really worried about this. I'm anxious. I got a knot in my stomach, you know, or my throat feels tight. I feel like everybody's looking at me. Everybody knows that I don't have enough Spanish to be here, right? And sort of register everything that's happening in my body, in my mind, and then register, how does this feel? Oh, it really hurts. It really hurts to feel like this, you know? And maybe put a hand on the heart and say, you know, this hurts, right? And feel some tenderness toward myself, rather than beating myself into a pulp because I didn't take that extra class, you know, that would have made me a perfect Spanish speaker. Or why are people walking so slow, you know? We work with our students all the time because this happens every time. You know, it's like clockwork. I'm feeling really frustrated right now with these slow madrileños, you know? My chest feels tight, feel like screaming at people, you know, hurry up. And then we teach our students, why don't you ask yourself this question? Why are you trying to go so fast? You know? And so if they can all of a sudden learn and go, you know what? Okay, I've been getting taught to try things on and inquire and adapt. Why don't I try to slow down and see how slow walking feels, you know? Maybe my chest will feel less tight. Let's see what happens, you know? Cultural experiment, right? People are so unfriendly to me here. Strangers don't say hello. I don't understand, you know? I don't understand why strangers feel so cold or seem so cold to me, you know? And I'm expecting people to smile at me and they don't. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I don't know what's going on, you know? And that hurts. I'm going to ask somebody at the program center to give me some insight on this, right? So you see the difference between these ways of dealing with what's unpleasant and what's uncomfortable. And at the core of all this is this nagging suspicion we have as humans that when we're suffering, we think there's something wrong with us. We think we don't belong to the human race. We think we're defective, you know, because everything should be okay, which is, again, 100% false. Part of the human experience is suffering. We all suffer. We all have difficulty. We all grieve. We all lose friends, people. We all get frustrated. We all fail, right? We all disappoint. We get disappointed. This is just part of the realm of human feeling. And so if we can use self-compassion to open our hearts and actually feel like my suffering connects me to the rest of humanity, this is what it means to be human, to feel this difficulty. This is what it means to be human and feel helpless, right? This is what it means to feel human and feel afraid. This is what it means to feel human and feel angry, right? So if we can get some space around these stories and we can understand that our difficulties connect us and make us superhuman, right? Then we can attend to our feelings, and then we got this space to make choices. You know, how can I help myself? And what's really going on here? And all of that process is basically learning how to befriend yourself. It's sort of like doing to yourself, you know, showing yourself the same kindness that you would easily show a friend. But we're so hard on ourselves, right? That to show ourselves kindness feels like self-pity or self-indulgence, right? It's much easier to be self-critical. But research actually shows that kindness towards yourself is a much more motivating factor than self-criticism, right? Because you can have a hard time and still be kind to yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be winning. So these are the practices. I have about 3 minutes left here. These are the practices that we try to teach. Intention, you have to be intentional about intercultural work. You have to be paying attention to what's happening out there and in here. Try to suspend judgment. You don't have enough information to make conceptual judgments at this particular moment. Ask questions, be curious, be like that mindful alien that comes down and is just fascinated. You know, what's this all about? Try things on, try slow walking, even though it feels weird. Be kind to others, be kind to yourself, and try to adapt. And when we say try to adapt, we're not saying don't leave behind your own cultural conditioning or your own cultural frameworks, but try to figure out how you can fit into this one and connect to it. So these are the structures that we have in place, and I only have a little bit of time left, but we have a critical studies curriculum that is mindful of how power and social relations work in Spanish society, critical peninsular studies that look at questions of anti-racist, intersectional relationships, about who's included and excluded, and how this society tells its own exclusive story about who it is. Micro-mentoring with staff. We have a fantastic staff and faculty, and we have regular meetings with staff in which we can provide that ongoing mentoring and provide support and challenge to our students as they need it. IFG, intercultural focus groups, where students get to actually, in small groups, do that work of being reflective and thinking about what's my attitude? How am I showing up for this intercultural work? You know, where do I need support? Oh, you have that too. Okay, I'm normal. The Laboratory of Anti-Racist Intersectional Pedagogies, where we as a program foreground being mindful about questions of anti-racism and how that's working in our own curriculum and in all of our student engagement resources. And then identity-based affinity groups for students of color, queer and questioning, African descended. Places not just to share challenges that may particularly affect people with particular identities that can be targeted by oppressions in Spanish society, but also places to share joy and to find out how to connect to collectives of people who share those identities in Madrid. And so the results are these, hopefully, increasing the ability to pay attention, easing self-criticism and self-blame, increasing the ability to be kind, increasing curiosity and interest, confidence, and developing broad skills and attitudes that can be taken wherever you go in your life. And that is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Oh, 42 seconds over. Thanks very much. I'm really happy to be a part of this, this panel today.